Well, I assume you enjoyed getting a break from readings and quizzes and the disembodied voice of Mrs. McConnell. But did the game make anybody mad? And if so, why? Well, we sometimes enjoy breaking rules, but still, most of us count on the basic rules of life to be fair, or at least to be predictable. Otherwise, we can't make plans. What you have to understand about World War I and its immediate aftermath is that all of the rules seem to break down, and they seem to break down all at once. So men had marched off to war expecting a quick and glorious victory. They ended up, as you know, in the trenches with rotting feet and the prospect that a change in wind might bring poison gas down on them, sometimes poison gas from their own side's canisters. In Russia, the old order fell apart entirely to be replaced by a communist regime led by Lenin. He promised land, bread, and peace. He pretty promptly took back the land he had given to the peasants, replacing individual holdings with collective farms, and this, as in China, brought not bread, but famine. He did get peace, at the expense of handing over big chunks of Russian territory in the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk with Germany. The striped area in this map is land that Russia ceded to Germany in this treaty, which of course was overturned when Germany lost to the West. So Russia got this land back, but it got it back because Germany surrendered before it could be defeated in the West by fresh American troops. It's important to remember that Germany won in the East and that it was not actually invaded or clearly conquered. A lot of Germans thought their leaders had sold them out at Versailles. They simply did not believe that they had really lost the war, and they were very angry about the clauses that forced them to accept blame for the war. That's the war guilt clause, and for the clause that required Germany to pay major reparations or financial payments to the Allies. But the most terrible blow that hit Europe right as the war was coming to an end was not caused by peace treaties or stupid statesmen or unwise military policies. It may, instead, have been caused by pigs. What I'm talking about is the Spanish flu epidemic of 1918. This pandemic, and that's a term for a huge worldwide epidemic, actually killed more people than World War I, at least World War I military battles. An estimated 20 to 40 million people worldwide died from the flu. This gives a larger figure. There, as is often the case with death tolls, widely ranging views. I'm giving you a somewhat more conservative one. But by contrast, about 9 to 10 million military personnel died in World War I. Of course, there were civilian casualties as well, although not, as you saw on the chart on your test, on the same scale as we will see, alas, in World War II. So here's a photo of mass graves being dug for flu victims in, of all places, Philadelphia. So I want you to watch a video clip that describes this, if you will, natural disaster, although as you'll also see, it may have been brought out in part by the war. And it came fast on the heels of Europe's clearly man-made disaster. So here are a couple of charts that give a picture of the impact of the Spanish flu. Most of the charts I found came from the United States that may have collected better data, but the epidemic was, as you've seen, worldwide. So what do we learn from this chart? Well, what we see is that the onset of the flu was very sudden and highly catastrophic. So between August and October 1918, the death rate per 1,000 people went from around 13 to around 53. That is a huge rise in the death toll. Now, this chart reinforces a point that was made in the video. And what is that point? There was an unusually high death rate among people who would be considered in the prime of life. Yes, the very young and the very old were still the most likely to die. That's true in almost any epidemic. Excuse me. But look at those high death rates among people aged 25 to 44. Why, this is really a thought question, would so many more men than women have died? Well, as you saw, army bases were one of the main places where the disease spread, and many more men served in the military. You also saw the explanation that healthy young people with strong immune systems actually had that working against them. That was something I didn't know before learning about this to prepare for this lecture. So here's a photo of the flu ward at Walter Reed Military Hospital. Before we close this brief examination of an incredibly important natural disaster, I want you to look at a nurse's eyewitness account of the flu and a science journalist's report of the flu's gruesome symptoms. Since you guys were also interested in trench foot, I thought you would find this intriguing. So now I'm going to turn to more man-made disasters, two economic crises that helped create the conditions for World War II, which is where we're leading now. Now, you saw this cartoon on your last unit test. France, in particular, was very eager to cripple Germany economically. As you know, France was very concerned about Germany's economic growth, and particularly the way German population was growing faster than France's. So under the terms of the Treaty of Versailles, Germany had to pay huge sums in reparations. It wasn't set, the amount in the actual treaty, but in 1921, the amount was established at 6.6 billion pounds. That's in 1921 dollars. That was a vast sum of money. I really should have looked up what that would be in current dollars. At any rate, it was an amount of money that Germany could not pay. And that's the point of this cartoon, of course. If the Allies really want to get money out of Germany, they're going to have to give Germany some opportunity to recover economically, and an unsustainable war debt is not going to do it. But the French, of course, were not especially eager to see Germany recover. Quite the contrary. By December of 1922, because the German government could not pay French and Belgian troops invaded and occupied the Ruhr, which was Germany's most important industrial and coal-producing region. They basically decided they would take goods and raw materials in place of money. So let's watch a BBC video clip about what happened next. What happens when money becomes worthless? What happened to you in the Monopoly game? It didn't become completely worthless, but you lost 90% in that last phase, right? Well, everything people had been counting on, had been planning for, fell apart. And of course, the people who were hardest hit were the ones who had planned the most, who had worked hard, who had saved money, who had done the right thing. Overnight, all of this effort turned out to be worthless. As it happened, Germany actually managed to pull out of hyperinflation, partly because much better leaders rose to power in the mid-1920s, something I would love to talk about, but I'm not going to because of lack of time. However, in 1929, the whole world was hit by the U.S. stock market crash, which sparked a Great Depression that quickly spread around the world. That's another topic I would love to talk about in more detail. Pretty confident you'll study it next year in U.S. history. What you need to know for the purposes of this course is that the German economy was especially vulnerable to a worldwide depression, since it was built on foreign money, mostly loans from America. It was also very dependent on foreign trade. America, also in an economic crunch, called in those loans, and the world market for German exports dried up. And so the German industrial machine, which had really almost recovered from World War I, ground once again to a halt. As production levels fell, German workers were laid off. And along with this, banks failed throughout Germany. Savings accounts, the result of years of hard work, were instantly wiped out. Inflation followed, making it hard for families to purchase expensive necessities with devalued money. Let's watch one last video clip and read one last eyewitness account. Think about how Germany and Europe was ripe for the rise of dictators who seemed to offer a new path. So this rather complicated map gives a quick summary of the Depression in Europe. You have a copy in your notes template. Note again how hard hit Germany was. So basically, for the second time in less than a decade, large portions of Germany's middle class were wiped out almost overnight. This time by events that were really largely outside their control. Germany and much of Europe was ripe for a new political message. In our next lesson, we're going to look at the scary new leaders who offered that message and emerged in the 1930s.